What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about Norway's deal with the European Union. So, from what I understand, Norway is in Europe, but you guys are not a part of the EU. But apparently, Norway, instead, you have some special deals with the EU. I don't really understand how a lot of this works, so that is exactly why I want to take a look at this video today that's going to explain Norway's deals with the European Union. So let's take a look.
Norway's relationship isn't a trade agreement in the traditional sense. That being said, Norway's relationship with the European Union, one that's constantly evolving, is an interesting one to consider, so we're doing it anyway.
Okay.
As always, let's get some background first. In 1960, the European Free Trade Association, or EFTA, was established, aiming to promote closer economic cooperation and free trade in Europe.
European Free Trade Agreement. European Free Trade Association. Is this like a group? I've never heard of this. Okay. Promotes trade and cooperation in Europe. Okay.
With substantially more members than now, including Norway, Austria, Denmark, Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland and the UK. Since then, the group has shrunk, as members decided to further integrate into the EU by joining the EEA or the EU itself.
So Norway is still a part of this, 60-year-old agreement, the European Free Trade Association. You guys are a part of this.
Between 1961 and 1967, Norway, along with Ireland, Denmark and the UK, twice applied to join the European Economic Community, twice being struck down by French President Charles de Gaulle.
What's the European Economic Community? There's a lot of European groups and trade agreements and a lot of stuff like that I've never really heard about. They didn't really teach us about this in a school growing up here in the United States. I don't know any of this.
Who also explicitly vetoed the UK's application, leading to a freezing of other members' applications to the club.
Norway tried to join this group and was declined twice.
In 1969, following the resignation of de Gaulle, the country's applications were reheated, with negotiations finally beginning the next year.
Okay.
The negotiation of joining the European community was finally put to the Norwegian people in a referendum. A referendum
European Economic Community. This is different than the European Free Trade Association. This is the European Economic Community. It's hard to keep track of all these. Norway wanted to join this. Norway doesn't join the EU, but you guys have joined these things, though. Okay. Or it was put to a vote in Norway. Norway got to vote.
In which 53.5% of Norwegian rejected European Community accession. Something they do yet again in 1994, rejecting explicit EU membership with a majority of 52% of the Norwegian electorate.
Okay. Oh, is this the EU? European Economic Community? Is that the same thing as the EU? I don't know. But either way, Norway voted not to join this.
Something they do yet again in 1994, rejecting explicit EU membership with a majority of 52% of the Norwegian electorate.
It's a pretty close vote, isn't it? 52%? That's a really, really close vote.
The very purpose of the European Economic Area is clear: access to the European single market without becoming a member of the European Union. As the European Parliament themselves report, the current EFTA countries do not wish to join the EU.
So Norway can be a part of this group, the special group of countries that want to do trade in Europe, but are not a part of the EU.
Despite not requiring full integration, the European Economic Area goes beyond traditional free trade agreements by
Okay.
extending the full rights and obligations of the EU's international market to the EFTA countries, which means incorporating the four
Wow.
freedoms: free movement of goods, people, services, and capita. All the while leaving EFTA members out of the customs union, out of the common trade policy, out of the economic and monetary union, and crucially for some, out of the common agricultural and common fisheries policies.
Oh, interesting. So Norway, you guys get a lot of the benefits that most EU countries get, but you don't have to be part of the EU. That's a great position to be in, right? You're not under the jurisdiction of the EU or their voting or anything like that. Norway is just this independent country that gets to have a lot of the benefits of the EU. I mean, there's a couple things here that you don't get, like how Norway does not use the euro. Maybe you don't want to. Maybe Norway likes that you don't have to use the euro.
Although, that's not to say that fishing is completely free from European control. Agreements do exist in line with the spirit of the common fisheries and agricultural policies. In fact, the EEA agreement, which underpins the area, nonetheless guarantees equal rights and obligations within the internal market for individuals and economic operators in the EEA.
Oh my god, this is very dense. This is a lot of information. Yeah, I would think Norway would do this kind of trade with Europe. You guys have a lot of fish, salmon in particular. Norway has a ton of fishing, right? So you're definitely doing trade with Europe.
Norway's relationship with the European Union has been a point of contention before.
Yeah.
Throughout the Brexit debate and the negotiation period, the prospect of the UK remaining closely aligned with the European Union as a member of the EEA and EFTA was for many on the cards. Therefore, some suggested that the UK could simply Command C, Command V existing agreements with very little contention, following a Norway-style model.
So the UK left the EU, and they wanted to do exactly what Norway does.
But is this even true? Well, putting aside the drawbacks of EFTA EEA membership for the likes of Norway and others for the moment, can the EFTA model simply be copied and pasted for other countries?
So there are drawbacks? This sounds like a really good arrangement for Norway. You get a lot of the benefits of the EU without having to be a part of it. But you're part of this EFTA and EEA stuff, and I'm not sure what the downside is. It seems like Norway has a really good thing going. I don't know. I don't understand everything.
It's worth noting that all EFTA countries are relatively small, hence the entry of a medium or large member such as the UK may end up diluting the club. Professor Anand Menon of the UK in a Changing Europe highlighted this very issue back in April 2019. The EU itself would have to have a say as to whether to let us into the EEA. Would member states really be happy to provide a competitor economy the size of the UK the benefits enjoyed by small, specialised economies of the EEA?
So the UK really tried to copy Norway. They wanted the same exact arrangement and trade deals as Norway. It sounds like this never really happened, but it's one of the reasons Norway is allowed to even have this arrangement is because it is a smaller country, even though Norway has a really big economy. Interesting.
Norway, by far the biggest economy in the EEA, is economically equivalent to the northwest of England, Yorkshire and Humber combined. Iceland's economy is the size of Suffolk's, and Liechtenstein's is less than half of Coventry economically. The knock-on impact on the single market of these economies not fully applying to EU regulations is relatively minor. When it comes to the UK, it would not be.
I see. So this would never work for the UK. This is a very special arrangement that Norway has. And
Norway ultimately is not part of the European Customs Union, which means that trade into the EU is far from completely frictionless. Rather, rules of origin exist. Norwegian goods, barring farm produce and fish, can be imported tariff-free into the EU, but
Oh.
Norwegian exporters must prove that their goods qualify as having originated in Norway.
Oh, so trading with so Norway, there are some drawbacks. Norway has accepted that trading some goods within Europe is going to be a little more difficult, but I mean, Norway is considered to be an amazing success and a very, very, very successful economy and country. So this clearly this arrangement has worked out very well for Norway, even if there are some hurdles to trade.
To benefit from this preferential treatment, with the Institute for Government stating that typically an export arriving in the EU from Norway needs to be 60% local value added to be eligible for tariff-free access. However,
Okay.
unlike the likes of Canada, for example, Norwegian exporters do not have to undergo regulatory checks. So, does the European Economic Area ultimately work for Norway? Well, from a friction point of view, yes. Norway applies EU regulations and thus avoids most of the non-tariff barriers. Border processes are streamlined given shared IT systems and joint control zones. And
You know, for most of this, I feel like I'm following along and I understand. And then they say something like this: joint control zones, border processes. Some things like this, I just don't know. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what they're talking about.
EEA waivers means that entry-exit declarations aren't required, further
Okay.
reducing friction.
Okay.
Norway can strike trade agreements with non-EU third parties, but the Institute for Government again highlights that these tend to be shallower than the EU's. But Norway is often referred to as a rule taker. EEA members are consulted on new single market rules, but otherwise have no vote in deciding whether or not they're actually implemented. Regardless,
Oh. So Norway gets to have some influence. Norway is just like so important to Europe. It's clear because the EU lets Norway get away with a lot of special agreements and special allowances and special trade deals. Europe really likes Norway. That's what I think. Because Norway gets a really, really nice position here. And Norway even gets to influence the EU, even though you don't get an actual vote.
Norway themselves stress the closeness of their relationship with the EU. In a Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs brochure entitled Norway and the EU Partners in Europe,
Yeah.
it's highlighted that Norway and the EU share the same fundamental values and face many of the same challenges.
Right.
Close cooperation at political level is essential to find joint solutions to these problems.
That's cool.
Norway seeks to promote its interests and contribute to a positive development in Europe.
Yeah, Norway clearly wants to be a part of like the economy of Europe and has the same goals as the EU, and it's kind of a cool relationship actually.
So, what do you think? Do you think that the European Free Trade Association and EEA are the best of both worlds, or the recipe for a domestic disaster? And importantly, what EU trade agreement should we cover next? Let us
Seems to be working out really well so far. You know, again, I don't understand every last detail here, but it seems like Norway's deals with the European Union give it a lot of benefits. Norway is basically a part of the EU without being part of the EU. And that's pretty cool. Like, and it seems Norway's happy with that, and it's been working in Norway's favor. And this is just a topic that I didn't really understand a lot about. I knew that Norway wasn't a part of the EU, and now it makes a little more sense to me because Norway still gets a lot of great benefits. So yeah, really interesting part of Norway that I've never really learned about, you could say. So this was complicated, but very interesting. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on Norway's deals with the EU. That'd be interesting to hear about, especially from Norwegians out there. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting and learning about Norway and Norwegian culture and seeing things in Norway I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.